Hey, good morning, Overlook Presbyterian Church. My name is Josh Taylor, and again, we are still in days that we never really expected to be, but here we are. And I hope that you're encouraged. I hope your days of quarantine and isolation have not been too terrible. Hopefully, you guys are staying healthy, and you're obviously washing your hands often. And I'm looking forward to the day where we can all just embrace one another again and just return to whatever the new normal is going to be. I know that there's going to be a lot of things that change after this, which, some of it is great, some of it maybe not so great. But I've seen a lot of great things come from this, and it's forced people out of their comfort zones. It's forced a lot of churches to redeem technology and really use it to our advantage. And honestly, the gospel and the kingdom of God still goes forward. Nothing can stop it. And so it's been exciting to see that happen. And hopefully we can return to days where we can embrace one another and spend time together physically again soon. But until those days, we are here utilizing YouTube and technology and Facebook and social media and all these things to encourage one another with the Word of God. And so that's what I want to do this morning. And for this morning, what I want to talk about is the idea of slowing down. Over the next few weeks, you and I, we're going to have that opportunity. We're almost kind of forced into that opportunity to just slow down. And so I want to talk about that. And I want to look at a passage, an encounter that Jesus has with his disciples that I think one speaks very much to me. It speaks very clearly to me as somebody who is always on to the next thing. And I find myself very busy. That's just my personality, is to stay busy. It's difficult for me to slow down. And so I do want to talk about the idea of hurriness and something that we can hopefully take advantage of over the next few weeks. So Time Magazine back in the 60s gave an expert testimony, or they wrote about an expert testimony that was given to a subcommittee of the Senate on time management. And the essence of it was that because of advances in technology, within 20 years or so, people would have to radically cut back on how many hours a week they worked, or how many weeks a year they worked, or else they would have to retire sooner. The great challenge, they said, was that people is what people would do with their free time. But 60 years later, not many of us would say that our primary challenge in regard to time is what to do with the excess. I feel like, we can relate to that. That 60 years ago, we thought technology was going to change everything. That, and in a lot of regards it has, but technology was always created to help give us more time. And I feel like that really hasn't happened. And probably it has. If we looked at our schedules and we looked at our calendar, we probably do have more time than we think we have. But we usually fill it up. It's like when people move to a bigger house and they say, I've got all of this much space. We usually find ways to fill it all up. Where we find a lot of more junk. And that's kind of what we do with our schedules and our time. The more time that we have, we usually still fill it up with something. And so I think 60 years after this article was written from Time Magazine, where we thought we would have so much time on our hands that we would be wondering what would we do with all of this excess, that's not really the problem that we have. We'll buy anything that promises us more time. The best-selling shampoo in America rose to the top because it combined both shampoo and conditioner into one, so that you only had to wash and rinse your hair once instead of twice. How inconvenient is that? Domino's Pizza became the #1 pizza company because that company promised to deliver in 30 minutes or less, or it was free. You remember those days when you could order a pizza, and if it wasn't there in 30 minutes or less, they would give it to you for free? Detroit Hospital guarantees that emergency room patients will be seen within 20 minutes or the treatment is free. Imagine that. The paper notes that since the offer was made, business was up 30% at the hospital. We worship at the shrine of the Golden Arches at McDonald's, not because they sell the best food, but because they promise fast food. Even after fast food was introduced, people still had to park their cars. They had to go inside. They had to order their food. They had to take it to a table and eat. So we invented drive-throughs so that people could eat it in their vans the way that McDonald's should be enjoyed. Our world has become the world of the Red Queen in Alice in Wonderland. Here's what the Red Queen in Alice in Wonderland says. Now here you see, it takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place. If you want to go somewhere else, you must run at least twice as fast as that. Meyer Friedman defines hurry sickness as, above all, a continuous struggle and unremitting attempt to accomplish or achieve more and more things or participate in more and more events in less and less time, frequently in the face of opposition, real or imagined, from other persons. Hurry will keep us consumed by the cares and riches and pleasures of life, as Jesus said. And it prevents Jesus' way of taking root in our hearts. So I want to look at Mark chapter 6, verse 30 through 33, and I want to look at an encounter that Jesus has with his disciples. And they've just come off of basically this great mission trip. They've just been preaching the gospel, and his disciples are on fire, and they're getting back and settled in at home. And here's what Jesus says. In Mark chapter 6, verse 30, it says, "The apostles returned to Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. And he said to them, 'Come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest a while.' For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And they went away in the boat to a desolate place by themselves. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they ran there on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them." So Jesus was quite aware of this kind of problem in his day, which seemed to be the same problem that we have in our day. He repeatedly withdrew from crowds and activities. He taught his followers to do the same. When the disciples returned, their adrenaline was pumping from a busy time of ministry, and Jesus says to them, "Come away to a desolate or deserted place all by yourselves and rest a while." So the Apostle Mark explains that many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. I think that can be a motto for many of us today, that I'm so busy I don't even have time to eat lunch. Most of us skip lunch not because we're not hungry. We just don't notice that our body is hungry because we're so busy. Some people imagine this to be a good thing, that perhaps God is going to reward that one day. Like, what a great life you had. You were so busy, you didn't even have time to eat. But Mark didn't mean this statement to be a commendation. Jesus urged his disciples to take time out. Basically, following Jesus can't be done at a sprint. If we want to follow someone, we can't go faster than the one we're trying to follow. We must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from our lives. This doesn't mean that we're never going to be busy. Jesus often had a lot of things to do, but he never did it in a way that severed his life-giving connection between him and God the Father. He never did it in a way that interfered with his ability to give love when love was called for. He observed a regular practice of withdrawing away from activity and away from people for the sake of solitude and prayer. So Jesus was often busy, but he was never in a hurry. Hurry is not just a disordered schedule. Hurry is a disordered heart. There's a ton of reasons why hurry is dangerous for the Christian life, and I don't have a lot of time to go into it, but I want to look at one. It's one that Lewis Grant calls sunset fatigue, and I think that this is one that most of us can relate to. When we come home at the end of the day, after a long day's hard work, those who need our love the most, those whom we are most committed, end up getting whatever's left over. Like, we're so tired, we're so drained, we're often so burdened. I know in ministry, I was often burdened at the end of the day. That when I walk into my home, my son and my wife, they were getting whatever was left over. Sunset fatigue is when we're just too tired, we're too drained, or we're too preoccupied to love the people to whom we've made the deepest promises. Sunset fatigue is set in, Grant says, when you find yourself rushing, even when there's no reason to rush. When you just always have this constant feeling of, I've got to be here, I've got to be here. I always feel rushed, even when there's no hurry. He says sunset fatigue sets in when there's an underlying tension that causes sharp words or sibling quarrels, when you're saying things that you don't really mean. When you set up mock races. Okay, kids, let's see who can take the bath the fastest. And those races are really more about you getting on to the next thing than it is really about your kids having fun. Or when you sense a loss of gratitude and wonder. When you're too busy to just stop and be grateful for your life, grateful for the things in your life, for the people in your life. When you lose that sense of wonder, when you can't stop and just look at the sky and the stars and the beauty around us and just wonder in amazement at who God is. Or when you indulge in self-destructive escapes from fatigue, when you begin abusing alcohol or watching too much TV or spending too much time scrolling through your phone. Hurry kills love. And hurry is the great enemy of our spiritual lives. Hurry lies behind much of the anger and frustrations of the modern life. Hurry prevents us from receiving love from the Father or giving it to His children. That's why Jesus was never in a hurry. If we are to follow Jesus, we must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from our lives, because by definition, we can't move faster than the one who is leading us. I think that we can do this. I think that we can become people who don't live hurried lives. I think that we can become people who are patient. I think that we can slow down. I think that we can live lives where we have wonder again, where we're grateful again, where we have not only ordered schedules, but ordered hearts for the sake of God's glory. And so there's a couple of cures that I want to talk about over just a few moments. And the first one is this idea of slowing, what we might call slowing or slowing down. This involves cultivating patience by deliberately choosing to place ourselves in positions where we simply have to wait. Now, this is one of the two cures that I'm going to show you that's very practical that you can do this week. And in fact, I want you for the next month, there's a couple of things that I want you to try just to intentionally slow your life down. And we're almost going to play a game here. So when you go to the grocery store, for me, when I go to Publix, if I have a few things, I'm going to go find the shortest line. I get frustrated, and you might get frustrated as well. And sometimes it might be me that you're getting frustrated with when people show up in the 10 items or less line and they have more than 10 items. And we're looking for that line. And if it's not the shortest, we're going to go find the shortest. And not just the shortest, not one that has just one person in it, but one that doesn't have a basket full of stuff in it too. Or we see the cashier has really got this down and they're really moving through it, and it's not the one that's always got to turn their light on and wait for a manager to come punch in their code. And so what I want you to do is, if you have an opportunity to go to a grocery store safely over the next couple of weeks, find the slowest line. Deliberately get in the line that's the slowest. In fact, not only that, but maybe let the person behind you, if their basket is more full than yours, let them go ahead of you. Find intentional ways to slow down. Here's also what I want you to do. I want you to get in the slowest lane on Airport Boulevard. I want you to drive behind the slowest person on Airport Boulevard. And if there's not a slower person, then you're probably the slowest person on Airport Boulevard. But I want you to intentionally find a way on Airport Boulevard, or whenever you're driving this week, to slow down, to get behind the slow person. Declare a fast from honking. For the next month, put your horn on a vow of silence. I want you to eat your food more slowly this week. Commit to chew each bite 15 times before you swallow it. Go through one day without wearing a watch. We need to find deliberate ways to choose to wait that make hurry impossible. And as we practice them, we should tell God that we are trusting Him to enable us to get done the things that we need to get done. And then the other solution to this, and this is one that I encourage you to practice over the next couple of weeks, not for the next couple of weeks, but if you can find some time. I know many of us have kids that are at home all day, and so this might be a little bit more difficult, but maybe we can work out a deal with our spouse or our friends or something like this, and practice solitude. And here's what solitude looks like. This is a more traditional practice. Jesus engaged in this often. At the beginning of His ministry, Jesus went into the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights for fasting and prayer. He also went into solitude when He heard the news of John the Baptist being beheaded. He went into solitude with His disciples after He had been involved in healing a leopard, and after His followers had engaged in ministry like the passage we just looked at. And this pattern continued into His final days of His life when He withdrew into solitude at the Garden of Gethsemane right before He was arrested and crucified. Jesus ended His ministry the same way that He began it, with solitude, practicing solitude. And Jesus taught His followers to do the same. He said to them, "Come away to a desolate place." And He says the same to us still. So wise followers of Jesus have always understood the necessity and benefit of solitude. It is, to quote an old phrase, the furnace of transformation. And what makes solitude so important? Well, solitude is the one place where we can find freedom from the impact of the world around us that will otherwise relentlessly mold us. You see, there are things around us that are trying to transform us. The world, the culture is constantly trying to transform us. And at the same time, if we're followers of Christ, the Spirit of God is also transforming us. And what solitude does is it allows us to move away from society, allows us to move away from culture, away from the world, and fully be engulfed in the Spirit of God. So that transformation begins to take place in our lives. At its heart, solitude is primarily about not doing. Just as fasting means to refrain from eating, solitude means to refrain from society. When we go into solitude, we withdraw from conversations. We withdraw from the presence of others. We withdraw from noise. We withdraw from the constant barrage of stimulation. In solitude, Henry Nouwen writes, I get rid of my scaffolding. See, scaffolding is the stuff that we use in our lives to prop ourselves up, to convince ourselves that we are important or okay, that we're essential. In solitude, we have no friends to talk to. We have no phone calls to take. We have no meetings to be. Therefore, we have no television shows to watch. We have no music, no books, no newspapers, no news to occupy and distract our minds. And each of us would be, in the words of the old hymn, just as I am. Neither accomplishments, nor resumes, nor possessions, nor networks would define me. In solitude, it's just me. It's my sinfulness, and it's my desire for or lack of desire for God. And so here's my challenge to you this week. As we move into this Easter season and what looks to be a weird, different Easter season, we're going to experience this very differently. As we move into Palm Sunday next week, I want to encourage you to prepare your hearts by withdrawing. This isolation thing, this quarantine thing, this has been really difficult for most of us because, well, one, we're created for community. We're created to desire relationships, and that's just part of us, being formed in the image of who God is. I mean, obviously, with the Trinity, community is an important part of who we are. But it's also been difficult for us because we don't know what to do with the silence. Often we're scared of the silence, or we're scared of being bored. And so I want to encourage you over the next week to take those moments that you have where you just don't have anything to do, and one, be grateful to God that you can just stop. Thank Him for that. And then just spend some time listening. Spend some time withdrawn from the news. Turn the news off. Turn off technology. Turn the phones off. Put down the newspapers and just listen to the Spirit of God. Take comfort in knowing that He keeps His promises. Take comfort knowing that He loves you. And just find a few moments of peace. I want to challenge you over the next week to try to find at least 2 times where you can spend some real time with Jesus this week in solitude, where you're listening, where you're turning off the radio, you're turning off the music, you're turning off whatever distractions are there, and you're just in the stillness. It's just you. It's the reality of who you are, and it's the reality of who God is, and experience Him. And let's take what we're being forced into over the next couple of weeks. None of us asked for this. None of us chose this. None of us wanted this. But it is here. And over the next few weeks, let's take advantage of the opportunity to not be in a hurry. And let's grow spiritually. Let's do that together. Let's do that individually. And when we get to come back together as a community, let's tell stories of what God showed us and what He said to us, and promises that He's made that we know He'll keep. I look forward to seeing you guys next week for Palm Sunday, and we'll do it just like this. Unfortunately, I wish we could all be together, but we can't. And so we'll continue to encourage one another through prayer. Call somebody this week. Make touch points with people this week. Check in on people this week. Love people this week. Love your grocers. If you go to the grocery store, if you go to the doctor to get checked up, thank your healthcare workers. If you are a healthcare worker, we thank you for your diligence and your hard work and your sacrifice and risks that you're taking. My prayer for you this week is that you guys would be encouraged and that you would hear the voice of Jesus in your lives. Have a great week.